Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Chantex Multimedia presentation, which is a presentation of Brisbane Indian Times and Australian Indian Radio. And hey, it's a wonderful day out there. Wow, we have reached the end of winter, eh? Last day of winter today, and the weather out there is looking very good. So with the weather news and the weather update, let's welcome Dilraj.
Good morning everyone. Forecast for the rest of today is a maximum of 27 degrees. Brisbane area is mostly sunny with light winds. Chances of rain are 0%. Fire danger is high and sun protection is recommended till 2:40 p.m. UV index predicted to reach 6, that is high. And spring 2020 will begin in Australia from tomorrow, that is 1st of September, and it will end on 30th of November. And spring is a time when flowers bloom and trees begin to grow and reproduce. The days grow longer and the temperature in most areas become more temperate. You can also contemplate the melting of ice and the thawing of ground. Till tomorrow, stay safe and have a good day. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and wonderful news. And as I'm ending winter and Dilraj is welcoming spring, and wonderful, looking forward to that spring. Well, right now, hot of the press is the Premier's update on what's been happening in the Queensland. Let's just see what happened in the weekend. So let's join the Premier.
With our update on health, and then we'll move on to discussing Cairns and also our tourism announcement for today for the tropical far north. So first of all, can I update everyone with stating that we have one new case overnight in Queensland, which is a very positive news, and that person, that new case, is a close contact of someone from the Correctives Services Training Academy. So we're very happy with that. In the last 24 hours, over 6,800 tests were conducted. And once again, we encourage anyone who has any symptoms to please go and get tested. It is absolutely imperative to go and get tested. So look, I'll hand over to the Deputy Premier to say a few words, and then we're happy to take questions about health first, and then we'll move on to discussing other things. But I do want to say, before handing over to the Deputy Premier, let me say this very clearly, that Queensland will continue to have our borders closed to keep Queenslanders safe. I'm not going to be moved on this, so the federal government can throw whoever they want at that. We can have Clive Palmer as well, but I'm not going to be moved because fundamentally the health of Queenslanders is my number one concern. And you can't have a strong economy, you can't have the economy growing unless you have the health under control. Now, I've seen some reports today about a young boy who had an appointment at Prince Charles. And let me say, I understand that this is a very difficult time for people. It is a very emotional time for people. And what I've asked the Deputy Premier as Health Minister and also the departments to do is to actually set up a unit where they can deal with these specialist appointments in a coordinated manner. I also want to have a social worker working in that unit as well, because it is a very distressing time for families. And of course it's going to be like this for some time because our borders are closed to protect the health of Queenslanders. But we are not going to deny emergency treatment to people in New South Wales, and we are not going to deny specialist appointments to people who need the specialist appointments in Queensland. Let me make that very clear. And I understand how distressing this is, so we're going to set up this hotline to make sure that we can deal with these, to coordinate with the families in a timely manner, and then they will be prioritised to the Chief Health Officer. And as you can appreciate, our Chief Health Officer, Dr Young, has a lot to do at the moment, focusing on keeping Queenslanders safe, and by setting up this coordinated response by the end of the week, I actually think that will help alleviate a lot of concerns. So I'll hand over to the Deputy Premier, then we'll take questions on health, and then we'll move on to the other matters. Thanks, DP.
Thank you, Premier. So the additional case that we confirmed overnight was a close contact of one of the already confirmed cases connected to the Correctional Services Training Academy. They had been identified as a close contact already and were in quarantine at the time in which they became infectious, and so they're only thought to have been in the community for just 2 days. At this point of a rapid response to a cluster, this is really the best we can hope for. Very small numbers of people already identified as contacts and already in quarantine, and therefore of relatively low risk of continued spread. It means we have 27 active cases right now. In the last 24-hour period, the testing level has settled back to a more normal level of 6,865 tests. The result of that has been that our turnaround time in the labs has returned to close to the normal level. It was about 25 hours in the last testing period here in Cairns. They're turning those tests around in 10 hours at our public labs, which is fantastic. Thank you.
Can you tell us more about the unit? Will this be for doctors and non-medical call as well?
Yeah, this will be a dedicated unit within the Chief Health Officer's team that will be clinically led and include a range of professions, including, as the Premier said, social workers, nurses and doctors who will be the right people to be making these kinds of decisions. I want to emphasise that a lot of these exemptions get approved, a lot of them pass unnoticed. The couple that have been reported on are a very, very small proportion of the total number. However, they are too many, and so we want an escalation process so that they can be very quickly addressed. All of the tests that have come back at this stage have been negative. However, we continue to test throughout the lockdown and quarantine period, and so we'll continue to get test results over that full 2-week period. I'll have to get that number for you.
The 10-person limit of visiting people's houses, when will that be reviewed next? When might we see that?
That's the kind of thing that we would normally review after 1 to 2 incubation periods of no known infectious person in the community, and so that's still a number of weeks away.
We've seen small numbers so far, but is there a number that if we got to that restrictions would further tighten?
Well, again, that we'd have to see sustained community transmission, and we'll continue to monitor that. Well, first of all, I'd say that I really understand how distressing these situations are, but the border restrictions are in place for a reason, and that's to keep our community safe. Funerals are considered very high-risk events. They have been considered very high-risk events throughout the entire pandemic, and so sadly that has meant some people have missed the funerals of their loved ones, and all I could say is that I'm sorry that that's the case, but these border restrictions are important. Funerals are high-risk events.
Isn't the problem here, though, that they were stuffed around? They were originally told they didn't need an exemption. Then when they got closer to the funeral day, they were told that they did need an exemption.
Look, I understand those concerns, and certainly as the directions and restrictions have changed over time, that has on occasion resulted in confusion. If they have been provided incorrect advice at a point in time, then I'm sorry for that. The situation at this stage is that if they have travelled through a hotspot, they're unlikely to be granted an exemption at the border.
Doctors say that people who are struggling to buy masks at the moment, particularly GPs.
So in terms of GPs, I'd urge them to contact their primary health network. They have a supply from the national stockpile. However, if they are unable to access masks through that supply, then Queensland Health will make our mask stockpile available to the primary healthcare network. But it's important that we reserve that supply as far as possible for our hospitals, and so I would urge them to go through their usual suppliers in the first instance. With regards to the public, the Chief Health Officer has increased her advice with regards to masks, and so members of the public in the southeast should have a mask available if they find themselves in a situation where they can't socially distance, such as on public transport. But in my experience, the few stores I've visited in the last little while, there's been plenty of masks available.
It's concerned about the number of people buying face masks, given the advice from the Chief
Oh, look, there's no need to panic by face masks. We have a very large supply both in the national and the new state stockpile. There's lots in the private market as well that are entirely suitable. And I understand lots of people are making their own masks, 3-layer masks, which might not be quite as effective as those TGA-approved masks, but they're almost as good. I'd certainly urge retailers not to price gouge, but I don't think there'll be a lot of opportunity to. There is significant supply of masks that are suitable for the general public. So we've applied these restrictions on a HHS district by district basis. The Darling Downs HHS has had infectious people in their community during the period in which we are concerned, and so it's therefore important to put these restrictions in place. The gathering restrictions apply statewide at the level of 30, but in those areas of the southeast they have been limited to 10. People can gather in larger groups though at venues that have COVID-safe plans. So the implication of these restrictions should still mean people can go ahead with functions. It just means they have to move them to a restaurant, pub, club or a restaurant. Those restrictions, as I said, will continue to apply for that 1 to 2 incubation periods after we know that somebody was infectious in those communities, so we'll continue to monitor that. The advice of the Chief Health Officer is that in those areas, people should wear masks if they are unable to socially distance, that's an appropriate precaution that people could be taking right now.
Doctors have been warning for several weeks that there's been some confusion with those cross-border medical transfers. What's been the catalyst out of this?
Well, look, I'd emphasise just that throughout those few weeks, the vast bulk of these exemptions have been approved either by class or by individual very, very quickly, and so the number of cases that you're hearing, the number of cases that have been complained about, is actually a very, very small proportion of them. But we've said we want to do better, and so we've been discussing how we might be able to do that, how we might be able to make sure we have clinicians empowered and in charge of providing advice more quickly to the Chief Health Officer where that's required, and that's what we're putting in place. In regional areas, there is no known community transmission, no known risk of community transmission. If people feel better, if people feel more comfortable wearing a mask, then that's fine. There's no reason they shouldn't. It certainly won't do any harm. But that advice that where you can't socially distance in the community, you should consider wearing a mask, that just applies in the greater Brisbane, Logan, Ipswich, Toowoomba and Darling Downs and Gold Coast areas. There's no need for anyone to panic. There's plenty of supply. Lots of people I know are making their own masks. There's lots of fashion outlets selling fancy masks now. So there's lots of different mask options for people. There's no need for anyone to panic, and there's certainly no known infection risk here in Cairns.
So no known infection case here in Queensland. The only known case is in the detention centre and already in quarantine. So that is a good news out there. So it is wonderful to see that they have got that under control at this point in time. So right now, once we move on, let's take a look at what else is happening. And right now, we'll go and listen to this message from our Prime Minister. And after that, we'll go to Sydney FC and, of course, the Harris Park incident. So first up, or next up, I should say, is the Prime Minister. He also thanks people in the front line and other ones who have all stood by everybody together for the community in such trying times.
Morning, everyone. Can I start today, before moving to the reason for today's press conference, and joined by the Minister for Foreign Affairs, to thank Australians, whether they be in the hotspot of Melbourne or they be in regional parts of the country where they're dealing with the incredible frustration of border restrictions. Can I thank the small businesses of this country, the large businesses of this country, keeping people in work. This has been a very difficult time, a very frustrating time, a very anxious time, and Australians have just kept their determination up, their positivity wherever they can, And I want to thank them, just simply thank them, and ask them to continue to demonstrate the goodwill and the good faith that they have, despite the frustrations and the limitations and the anxieties that they have to cope with every day. As we gather here in this parliament under different circumstances to usual, the circumstances faced by many Australians, particularly in Victoria and in those border regions, is something quite different. And I just want Australians to know that we get that, and we know that, and we very much appreciate what you are doing each and every day. I welcome the fact that we've seen again continuation of lower numbers than we have seen in Victoria, nowhere near still where we would like them to be, and of course the fatalities we continue to see are devastating, and particularly for the families directly involved. And of course we know that we will continue to see that for some time yet, as the impacts of the community transmission, as it's worked its way through the Victorian community, will continue to have those impacts. But that said, Victoria has turned the corner, and we will continue to invest our efforts in assisting them to ensure that we can continue to get this outbreak under control and return life in Melbourne and across Victoria to as normal as you can in a COVID-safe world as soon as we can, and working with the states and territories to ensure that other restrictions, wherever they can be removed as soon as possible. The restrictions should be in only for as long as they are absolutely needed, and they should only be placed in where they are absolutely needed based on that medical advice. But to the announcement that we're making today, and the Minister for Foreign Affairs has already had the opportunity to make comment on this earlier today in media appearances this morning. But protecting and promoting Australia's national interest is the primary job of the federal government. It is what Australians elect federal governments to do. And this has always been our primary focus for our government. We need to ensure that Australia, not just at a federal level but across all of our governments, speak with one voice, act in accordance with one plan, consistent with the national interest as set out in Australia's foreign policy as determined by the federal government. And the new Australian Foreign Relations Bill does just that. Drawing on the powers available to in the Constitution, it enshrines those powers and provides very clear directions to do a number of important things. To establish the power to cancel and prohibit arrangements, memoranda, partnerships that are not consistent with Australia's foreign relations, that damage our foreign relations. It compels notification across all of those areas to ensure that we are aware when agreements, memoranda and other partnerships are being formed, to provide a transparency around all of those arrangements, which is important to assist the federal government pursue our foreign policy, which is about protecting Australia's national interests and promoting those national interests, and to ensure ultimately a greater awareness of the federal foreign policy settings that we are seeking the alignment of and the support of and the cooperation with of governments and government-related entities right across Australia. More than 130 agreements from 30 countries, and that's just states and territories that we know of and that are in the public domain. So the combination of the notification process, which in some cases could lead to the cancelling of those arrangements or their prohibition as governments or local governments or indeed universities in those circumstances that apply to them. In those circumstances it may lead to that. But it also may assist us that where there are partnerships with other governments, with subnational level or otherwise, that can assist Australia in promoting our foreign affairs and our national interests as we pursue those around the world, be it in trade or people-to-people relationships. Having knowledge of those arrangements can greatly assist us with our posts overseas and the work that we are doing. So this is an important day for sovereignty in Australia. It's an important day for ensuring that Australia's national interest is protected, is promoted. That is our responsibility, and that is our pledge to the Australian people to follow through on that pledge. Now, I want to turn to one other matter before moving to the Foreign Minister, and that is this week we're also introducing landmark legislation that sees Australia take responsibility for our waste and establishes a national industry relationship framework for recycling. The Recycling and Waste Reduction Bill will phase in the end of 645,000 tonnes of processed plastic, paper, glass and tyres that Australia ships overseas every year. The bill will implement the export ban on waste plastic, paper, glass and tyres agreed by the then COAG in March of this year, one of its final agreements as in that form of COAG. And the ban will commence in phases beginning with waste glass from the 1st of January next year. At the same time, the reforms to the regulation of product stewardship will incentivise companies to take greater environmental responsibility for the products they manufacture and what happens to those products and materials at the end of their life. The bill complements the Recycling Modernisation Fund and National Waste Policy Action Plan, which will create 10,000 new jobs over the next 10 years. That's a 32% increase in jobs in the Australian waste and recycling sector. And these reforms will drive a $1 billion transformation of Australia's waste and recycling capacity. It's our waste, it's our responsibility. We've got to deal with it and recycle it and repurpose it and reuse it here to both drive jobs in the recycling sector and also to improve the quality of our environment. This has been a key issue that I've been raising not just in the Pacific Islands Forum, and I only just spoke this morning to the Prime Minister of the Solomon Islands, Manasseh Sogavare, but it has also been an issue that I've been raising in the East Asian Summit and with our ASEAN friends and colleagues, where waste plastics in oceans is destroying communities, it is destroying their livelihoods, it is destroying their health, and this was a pledge that I said we would honour and that we would follow through on, and I think this is a great day for demonstrating Australia's leadership when it comes to an export ban on these waste products. When I talk to kids in schools, that's what they talk to me about. They talk to me about those plastic bottles and the things in the oceans, whether it's their rivers and oceans and streams or those floating around in the Pacific or around the seas of Southeast Asia. And so I'm very pleased that the Environment Minister will be introducing that bill today, as I know the Minister for Foreign Affairs is also.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister, and you're right, that will be a particularly well-received initiative in our region and is one which is a very important step forward. If I could just make a few further remarks on the Foreign Relations Bill, which, as the Prime Minister said, I've already spoken about a couple of times this morning. I think most importantly this legislation is about ensuring that we are consistent as a nation with respect to how we deal with the world, that we are taking a national perspective in our national interest, and we're all working on the world stage as a team. To date, there hasn't been a requirement and not even a clear understanding that the states and territories might consult with the Commonwealth when they make arrangements with foreign governments. And those arrangements often cover a wide range of issues, whether it's sister city relations to trade and economic cooperation. And we recognise the important contribution these arrangements can and do make to Australia's international engagement. The Commonwealth, and particularly my Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, has a deep and broad expertise to assess whether arrangements with foreign governments are in the national interest. When we don't have a process of consultation, the Commonwealth has no opportunity to review the proposed arrangements nor to apply that expertise. We risk having an uncoordinated patchwork approach to contracts or MOUs or relationships and collaborations that could have an adverse effect on our foreign policy. What the legislation will do is to give state and territory governments confidence when entering into arrangements that they are acting in a way that serves Australia's national interests, that it's aligned with our values and consistent with our foreign policy objectives. The legislation, as the Prime Minister has pointed out, will apply to existing and prospective arrangements between a state or territory government and a foreign government. We're not looking to impinge on state and territory governments' proper functioning or to micromanage these dealings with the world, but it's appropriate and it's necessary that the Commonwealth Government manage our foreign relations, protect our national interest and, importantly, maintain our values as a nation in doing that. Consistency, consultation and doing the due diligence on undertakings and arrangements is, I think, what the Australian people expect of their national government.
Thank you.
Given you're prepared to assert your powers over the states in relation to this, would you consider legislating in order to take over state borders to prevent border closures where they're not necessary, something that's really harming the national economy? And how many agreements do you see being cancelled as a result of this? Do those agreements include the Victorian Belt and Road Initiative?
Well, let me deal with the first part of the question. In relation to the border arrangements that have been put in place at a state level, as I said yesterday and I've said it many times, Australia wasn't built to have internal borders. Having internal borders in Australia is an extreme response, which can be necessary in extreme circumstances and based on a proper medical advice and a very transparent process for doing that. And we saw that in relation to the New South Wales-Victorian border. What occurred there was cooperation between the neighbouring states and indeed the Commonwealth, the appointment of a border commissioner.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll leave that report there as we now, talking about the foreign policies and our foreign relationship. It is wonderful to see that Australian laws are protecting the interest of Australia first. And when we're talking of, protecting the national interest and portraying the good name out there, there have been incidences which have happened lately which are very concerning and which are not a very good reflection on our community, the Indian community. I'm talking about the incident that happened in Harris Park. The incident is a very irresponsible and inconsiderate act by certain individuals. Well, the incident started off by war of words on TikTok and escalated to the fight in Harris Park. The clash has been between a Khalistan activist and Haryanvis. The incident was incited by a pro-Khalistan individual who went on this Chinese social media platform TikTok and raised his voice and of course challenged people, and that's what it led to. And I'll show you the clip of what actually happened there, just a glimpse of that. And community leaders over the weekend, I've been contacted by a few there as well, community leaders have condemned the incident and said that it tarnishes the good name of the Indian community. There is absolutely no place in Australian community for acts like this by such irresponsible individuals. See, these people are often ill-informed and very easily brainwashed into believing false causes. So there are people who are raising these causes, who are pro that, and they pass on this message on to these people who take it on. The main movement and the people who are behind the movement are still safe. They'll be hiding, but they will incite these people who are ill-informed and not that educated, and they will end up believing that this is true and this is what we have to do. We have to fight for this cause. And they take it to their heart, and that's how they act in this such low-down manner, and which spoils the name for the whole community. Of course, there are things, people have national pride, national days are celebrated together, but, other things, troubles and other things of other countries should be left there. If you have chosen to come to Australia, you abide by the laws here, follow the Australian way of life and do the right things here. Of course, everyone is free to practice their own cultures, religion, and the multicultural affairs also not only supports but encourages that. But when you have protests and things like that which are not concerning Australia at all, do not take it to the streets here. Do raise your voice on any concern that you have, but to the right place, to the right authorities. Go to the High Commission, sign a petition, take it to there, but don't take it to the streets like that in the manner in which it's done, in the back alleys back in India. Don't bring that standard here to Australia. So it's shame on you people for, doing what you have all done. It is just terrible, the act. So if you, you have all probably seen, the original clip on TikTok which is started this, but here's a small glimpse of the fight as it happened. So this is downtown Harris Park, and of course Harris Park has been in the news lately. Of course, that was that fight once that happened before, at another community function. An event. I'm not going to say which event it was. I don't want to be discriminatory there, but there was another incident which happened in Harris Park, and there has been quite a few incidents that have taken place there. But what I'm saying is, the point is that that you need to act in responsibility, responsible way. I'm not saying that whose views are right. Everyone has got a right to express their own views, but the views must be expressed in the right way, in the right manner, and of course at the right place. You can't just start doing things like this and taking to the streets in the manner which they probably know. These people are so illiterate, they haven't, yet discovered the ways of the world. Even though they have come here, they're still practicing the way and the way things are done in the back alleys back in India. So, please, boys, don't bring that here. It is just not the right place to do that. And I know there are many community leaders who have come on social media condemning these acts. And of course, the investigation is underway. And the guy you saw on the clip, the one who went drowned on the floor in the first hit, was the guy who actually incited the whole thing. Without taking names, he's the one who went on TikTok, and he really spoke is very offensive language that he used there as well. So please, this is not the way to portray the general public. The good name of the whole Indian community comes down. There's so much work that's been done out there in the community. We have very new budding politicians who are coming up and putting their hands out to go into community work. Think of everyone. Think of the whole community as a whole. Think of your community. Who are you representing? As we have seen that many people have said that these people are not representing their community at all. And so they take it upon themselves to have this kind of movement, which is really, really terrible. So ladies and gentlemen, with that, let's take a very quick commercial break.
ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी 1989 से लेकर अब तक का विश्वसनीय और माननीय ब्रिस्बेन का रियल एस्टेट एजेंट है। उषा चंद्रा, जो कि ग्लोबनेट की डायरेक्टर है, अपने ग्राहकों को ईमानदार और एथिक सर्विसेज देती हैं। अगर आप ब्रिस्बेन की प्रॉपर्टी में पूंजी लगाना चाहते हैं और आप चाहते हैं कि आपकी प्रॉपर्टी को प्रोफेशनली मैनेज किया जाए, तो आप आज ही कांटेक्ट कीजिए उषा चंद्रा को। लैंडलाइन नंबर है 38654466 और मोबाइल नंबर है 0419775416। और आप प्रॉपर्टी की अधिक जानकारी और करंट अपडेट्स के लिए हमारी वेबसाइट पे लॉगिन कर सकते हैं। हमारी वेबसाइट है www.globnetreality.com.au। ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी आपका अपना लोकल रियल एस्टेट एजेंट है। हमारा पता है ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी, शॉप नंबर 5, 2281 Sandgate Road, Bundal, Queensland. Globenet Reality. Real estate is our world.
and real estate. Is there well? Well, right now, let's take at the worldwide figures of coronavirus. And as we know, United States still leads the way. Out of the total 25 million, 5.9 million are from USA, from America. Second on the list is 3.8 million. And guess what? That is Brazil. And who should be on number 3rd spot? None other than India. Yes, 3.5 million cases, 3,542,733. That is what's reported. How many other cases there might be, who knows? Because, it's very hard to monitor everyone in such a big country, such a populous country where there is the population is so big. Well, right now, we're moving on with the cases. Victoria's case numbers is still too high for definitive plan to exit lockdown, as the Premier says. We will hear from him because he says that, it is still too early to ease those restrictions. And anti-lockdown protesters have taunted Melbourne police. So, this is... well, people might say, here are these protesters, what's happening with them? They are protesting of something that concerns us, that concerns Australia here. So anti-lockdown protesters, there have been this kind of protest in other countries as well. We will see that. And 7 new cases for New South Wales as thousands flock to the beach. Of course, last day of winter today. And Queensland records 4 new COVID-19 cases as a school, childcare and centres are closed. But we have had the update from the Premier that 1 new case overnight was in that detention centre. Well, right now, let's take a quick look at the top stories for today.
Predicted that from December, more than half of JobKeeper recipients will live in Victoria. The restrictions imposed in Victoria have had a devastating impact on the economy, and Josh Frydenberg is this morning warning things could get worse if the state borders remain closed. Premier Daniel Andrews is under increasing pressure to reveal details on just how restrictions may be eased in Victoria, with those stage 4 lockdown measures slated to finish in a fortnight's time. Queenslanders are being urged to wear face masks in public if they cannot socially distance. The advice comes after a childcare centre and a school were both caught up in a growing coronavirus cluster in the state's southeast. In New South Wales, health authorities have reminded Sydney-siders to socially distance after people flocked to beaches to enjoy that warmer weather over the weekend. And a public transport alert has been issued for an eastern suburbs bus after 2 positive cases on a popular route from the CBD to Randwick. A man will today become the first person fitted with an electronic ankle bracelet to monitor his movements, all part of Western Australia's anti-COVID measures. Police say a 53-year-old man returned to WA from Queensland on Friday without applying for an exemption to re-enter the state. And a man has been shot dead in Oregon as a large procession of President Trump supporters clashed with Black Lives Matter protesters in Portland. Police have not revealed the man's identity or specified whether the shooting was actually linked to the crashes.
So there you are, ladies and gentlemen, up to date on Chantex Multimedia presentation. Well, right now, let's go and listen to John Frydenberg as he says that Victorian businesses are being kept in the dark about a possible easing of the restrictions. Now, after that, we will listen to Premier Daniel Andrews and take his point of view as well. But here's the point of view of Josh Frydenberg.
I want to hear more about a message of hope for the people of Victoria. Daniel Andrews and the Victorian government need to be talking more about the road out than about a longer road in. There was real overreach when it came to the 12-month extension of emergency powers that he was seeking. And we're only 2 weeks away, Kieran, we're only 2 weeks away from the end of the so-called stage 4 restrictions. And businesses are in the dark as to how they will get their workers back and their doors open. Kids need to know when and if they are going back to school. In Victoria, families are subject to lockdown 23 hours a day. You can't move more than 5 kilometres from your home. There's a curfew at night. These are the strictest of restrictions, taking a huge toll on people's mental health, but also on the economy.
So did Daniel Andrews essentially have a complete tin ear when he suggested 12 months when people are already going through this sort of turmoil.
It was a very bad call.
And there you go. So that's his point of view. But, I add my little 2 cents worth is that, I think health comes first. So as the pandemic is a once-off event, it has never happened before. So planning and pre-planning sometimes is very hard. What needs to be done is it needs to be managed as the people move forward. So it's always better to overshoot the target than miss it. So trying to control it with some strict guidelines, maybe tough on some people at this point in time, but maybe in moving forward, that's the way forward, and that's how it needs to be done. So let's hear from Premier Daniel Andrews.
These numbers are coming down. We will see some variation day to day. They'll bounce around a little bit. But in general terms, we're seeing a fall across each of the key metrics. The strategy is working, and that's a credit to every Victorian who's made a powerful contribution to that end. But we just have to stay the course on this. At 100, at 94, at 114, whatever the number around that number, we simply could not open up. Those numbers would explode. We would finish up in perhaps an even worse situation than we have been in recent months, and we can't fritter away all of that good work, all that sacrifice, that pain, the challenges that every Victorian has endured and worked through. We can't have that count for nothing. So what we have to do is stay the course on this.
You guarantee, though, that if the numbers keep going the way they're going, keep going down for the next week, that businesses, the community will be given details by next Sunday, a week before?
Well, I can guarantee that I'll provide the most detailed plan I possibly can as soon as I possibly can. So the most detailed plan, as soon as I can possibly provide it, will be provided to every single Victorian. And we've just got to be guided. I know it's frustrating. Everyone all the way along, myself included, would love to have been able to be handing down plans and details and roadmaps that were essentially chiselled in stone. That is not possible. This is wildly infectious, highly variable. It changes fast. It changes rapidly. But the strategy is working, and we can be confident and hopeful and positive that we are going to defeat this second wave. And as soon as I can provide that detailed picture of what future phases across weeks and months will look like, I will do that. And at that point, people will be able to have the confidence to know that it's not so much a wish or a hope, it's a detailed plan based in evidence and science and the best of medical advice.
And a detailed plan, on evidence-based is what Premier Daniel Andrews is aiming at. And I tend to, go along with him on that part because, you can never be, too cautious in a situation like this. Of course, we know that, the second wave and everything got started by, the irresponsible acts with some people. And if you ease the restrictions right now, too soon, we will go back into that situation. So we'd rather wait a little bit and make sure that we go to serenity. Well, you'll remember that a few weeks back, we brought to you the news from Belarus. And what's happening in Belarus is that protesters, now we talk about protests, you look at the number of people who have come out in protest here, and earlier we saw that protest in America as well. So protesters really in Minsk at President Alexandra Lukashenko's birthday. Tens and thousands of demonstrators rallied the Belarusian capital of Minsk to begin the fourth week of daily protests. So, you look at these numbers, it's staggering, mind-blowing. The second really runs into that. So that's how many people have turned out. There's no social distancing there. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm also mindful of the time. So, moving forward, I'd like to sort of finish off on a lighter note. our rules, as we know, they differ in many sizes and many shapes and many forms that they come in. But these are probably the biggest of the rules here in Australia.
Up to 2 metres tall and weighing around 90 kilos. Red kangaroos tower over the desert. They are so large, few predators are game to take them on. So the Reds have ruled here for around 2 million years. In that time, they have evolved some peculiar behaviours. Female Reds only breed when there is enough food and water to support their young. So, in the very short windows that the females are receptive, the males must be ready. They flex their enormous chest muscles. This unusual kangaroo behaviour is designed to show off to the females and intimidate any rivals. Those with the biggest biceps usually win. The king buck in this mob tries to awe his audience with an impressive overhead pose. But there is one challenger who refuses to back off. Kangaroos are known for boxing, but it's their kicks that are the most devastating. Capable of delivering a full-body knockdown every 6 seconds, it's an incredible test of power and balance.
Aussie, oi, eh? Well, nothing like a good kick down and a box around the ears and those biceps. How good is that, oh well, need to head off to the gym again and, come up with some more muscles happening there. What is wonderful to see that. But right now, just before we finish off, let's take a quick look at the functions and events that have been planned. Now, this first one that we're going to talk about is now changing format a little bit, because now it will be presented in a virtual manner, and we have been talking with them, and there may be some updates which we will bring to you about how this will proceed forward. But there are many functions that have been put on hold and may be transformed into virtual events.